Now that we have our classes and design layers, so design layers and classes set up, we're going to go active into our sketch class. I can activate that by just clicking into the little sketch item there between the words and this column, and the tick should appear. Same with the design layer. Jump into sketch. I can also do that up across this toolbar up here, dropping down the tab next to either the layer or class, and I can just choose which one I want. So I can move between various things in there. Now we're in Sketch. What we're going to do is we're going to start drawing our step. If I bring this up, so we're going to start by creating basically the geometry of this flat. And the overall height of the flat is 3 meters, and the overall width of the flat is 2 meters. So we're going to start creating the geometry for this, which we can then build into our 3D object. I'll jump back to Vectorworks here. So I'm going to create a rectangle in the basic tool set. At the top here, we have all the different geometry. If I click on the rectangle tool, now the important thing to note is these different tool options that appear, and this will change depending on which tool you have active. Keep an eye on these and make sure that you're working in the right one for what you're trying to do. For us, the corner to corner mode on the rectangle is going to be perfect. What I can do is I can just start drawing anywhere in my design layer here. So if I click once, start pulling out, my little fuzzy mouse thing's in the way, which is a shame. For this, but when I start drawing out, hopefully you can just about see underneath this are these numbers next to the cursor. It's an awful shame that my mouse thing is there, never mind. So these are the dimensions of what I'm drawing. I can see what I'm drawing here. Now, if I want to put in this 2 meter by 3 meter, what I can do is I can press the tab button once before I click again. Press the tab button once, and you'll see that the first box is highlighted in blue. And I can type 2000 or 2000 millimeters, hit enter, and you'll see that that has put a hard limit on 2000 millimeters or 2 meters. If I now want to go and set the height, I press tab again and again to highlight the second measurement there, I can type 3000, or Vectorworks will also allow you to, will also understand things like designations for different measurements. So if I was to type 3m, it knows that that is whatever number before it in meters, and it will automatically do the conversion. But if you're doing something at 10,682 mil, which is 10 odd meters, it's quite boring to type all that in. So you could type in 10.62m, and it'll add the correct amount of zeros in it. Very, very handy. If I type 3m there, and then hit enter, let's lock that to 2 meters by 3 meters, and I'm going to press enter again, and that has created this rectangle. If I zoom in using the center mouse wheel here, or I could hop with the object selected, so with this rectangle selected with the orange outline, fit to objects, it's going to zoom right in for me. Just a reminder, and bear this in mind throughout all of the work you're going to be doing with Vectorworks over this exercises and in your drawings. When you have drawn something, you've pressed enter, it will remain in that tool set. So it's remaining waiting to create more rectangles or circles or whatever tool you have active. And that means that if you just start clicking randomly, you're going to start creating more rectangles or doing more offsets, etc., etc. And you don't want to be doing that, or you might not want to be doing that unless you're creating lots of rectangles. So if I press, you can either press the selection tool here, or you can press X on your keyboard, and that will take you straight back to your selection tool, and then you can click around. And I'm not going to keep drawing. Just a little tip there. Zoom this. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to center this on our drawing, and that's going to make our lives a little bit easier. So every drawing has a internal origin bit, which is 0, 0. If you think of the world in a graph and top graph, and in the 3D world as X, Y, and Z. So X and Y and X, Y, Z. You can see that down here. X being along and Y being up and down on the top plan mode. And when you jump into 3D mode, which we'll do later, you'll see effectively X is left and right and Y is forward and back. And your Z will be your height, which if you're coming from different design tools, different the software may be different. So just bear that in mind. Hopefully that makes sense. Often it's quite good to center what you're drawing onto your 0, 0 point. It makes typing in distance calculations, etc. a lot easier. And you can do that. So with any object, I'm just going to deselect this, next. So without any object selected, your object info palette will show no shape. If I click on the rectangle, it gives me all the details of that rectangle. And I can double check that I've done my width and my height correct. So 2000, 3000. And I can change this in here. So I could type in, if I've done something wrong, I can actually put in the right values into this. Below this are all of these sort of snap point circles. So you can see all of these blue rectangles on the actual object here relate to this. The center one, that's the little cross. And what you can do, where the little white mark is in the center of those, is where it relates to on the X and Y and how this will reform if you start changing the width. So at the moment, if I were to change the width, basically this will be its anchor point. What I can do is if I click in this center here, it doesn't change the position of this rectangle, but it does change its coordinate. So I can put this point, which is this point here, at the 0 point of the 0, 0 of the drawing, and it just makes everything really nice. If I highlight here and press 0, highlight Y and press 0, this will disappear. Fear not. I press the zoom, so fit to objects here, it will reappear. And that is sitting, this bottom corner here is 0, 0 internal origin. And what that means is basically I can start, I could say something that's 600 up from this, say, or I can relate around this object. What you will find for designers that are going into using these stage venue ground plans is this 0, 0 here will be the origin point. This origin point will be the center of the setting line on the stage, so where you'll design from. So you'll find that the 0, 0 is sort of like center of the stage, the edge of the 4 stage. But allows you to be, basically allows us to be able to measure from that, and we know where the set will go. Little hint there. Probably far too much information, but there we go. Now we have this, we're going to want to start creating this internal shape. Gently zoomed in. So if we jump back and have a little look at our handy plan here, we can see that this is the arched window that is in the flat. Now what we want to do, much like construction would do, kind of cut this out of that rectangle so that is the hole for the window, and that is the aperture of the window. The return will come back from that, and what we'll need to do is create a thickness to create the 3D object, to create this return. Here, this return isn't solid. It's basically makes it look like this window has some fake depth. So if you're sitting in the audience, you would think, hey, that's a thick wall. And it's not at all, because this flat is only 25 mil. But this return is 200 mil back of the flat. Which is this distance, just here. So we need to create this cutout, and we need to create a shape around that outlines that at 3 millimeters to create this return. So first things first, let's go and create this shape on top of our rectangle. Jumping back to Vectorworks, we have a rectangle here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start to create another rectangle. Again, jumping back to this, I'm going to create the rectangle here, but I'm not going to create it the full height of this window, because I want to create this arch. What I actually want to do, create a rectangle up to where this cross is just here, and then I want to sort of add a circle into this to create that arch. I'll add those two objects together. So I want to know the dimension of this rectangle here. If I scroll back up, I know that the width of the arched window is 1200 millimeters. Height of the arched window is 2 millimeters. And I know that the radius of the arch is 600 millimeters. So I know that this radius here, from there to there, is 600 mil. I know the full height is 2 meters. And that's awesome, because in Vectorworks, you can tell the when you're inputting the measurements in to give something its measurements, you can actually get it to do a calculation for you, which is quite cool. Again, I'm just going to make sure my rectangle tool is activated, and I'm going to start drawing again. I'm going to click here, and the first thing is I'm going to press my tab button, and I know that it's 1200 millimeters wide. I'm going to hit 1200 and hit enter. And then I'm going to hit tab and tab again to get my height dimension. And I'm going to say this is 2m, 2 meters high, minus that 600 radius. Now, that's probably very easy to do in your heads. I'm using this as an example. If you've got awkward measurements, make Vectorworks do it for you. It's a tool to do it. I hit enter now. It's done that calculation. Let's put that to 1400 millimeters. I'm going to press enter again. And now I have this rectangle. I'm going to press X, go back to my selection tool, so that I can position this. Now, the reason that we centered this at bottom center on 0, 0 is because I can then manually type distance in, the coordinates in, and give this, and get this centered and to the right height in the window. So I click here. This is center to the flat, and it is 600 mil off the base of the flat. Vectorworks. So in here, there's a couple of ways I could do this. Thankfully, Vectorworks has remembered that kind of like my anchor point to be the center. So on the X, which is left and right, I can give this a 0. And that's now centered this in the center of this. Now centered this in the center of this rectangle. And the Y, if I give that a 600, right, that's now put that 600 mil off the bottom. That's one way of doing it, and that's a good reason to center your drawings, or give it some sort of reasonable location or coordinate, because then you can easily do the sums and add things on. Another way of doing this, so if I pull this out here, say you just for whatever reason you can't have this thing centered or in a nice place. What I can do is I can use the snapping that's across here, automatically defaulted. That basically is all these points you see when I get close here. Cursor will change, that means it's snapping. If I click and hold on this bottom point, I can make this snap to the center there. So I've automatically got this centered left and right. Now I just need to do the height. Again, if I be careful, if I were to click and drag now, this will resize it. You'll notice how the cursor has changed to a diagonal arrows. That means that it will try and resize this object. You want it to be that little crosshair there. If I click and hold now, if I start pulling up, fortunately this is also under the mouse. You'll see that the first box, very vaguely underneath this mouse readout that I've got, is changing. If I press tab, I can designate this just like define it, just like we did with creating the dimensions of the rectangle or drawing it. I can tell it what distance I want this to actually go when I'm dragging it. So pressing tab once, pressing 600 and enter, you'll see that this radius appears, this circle dash. If I let go now, the direction that I want it to move, now locked 600. So that's one way to do it. A couple of ways of doing it, either by typing in the object info palette or by moving them in relation and pressing tab. And giving it sort of defined distance. Now I want to create the circle. Now this is going to be easy, thankfully. If I go to my circle tool here, and again, checking my tool options at the top here, I want to be in radius mode. Radius mode means that when that first click will define the center of the circle, and the next click will define the outside of the circle. So if I go to the center of this rectangle here, click once, you can see that I can drag out and make this circle any size I want. Because this rectangle is 1200 mil wide, this is automatically going, when I get to the edge, going to snap to be 600 mil, which is the radius that I want. I'm just going to click once, and there I have the basic outline of this geometry. Then press X so that I jump back to my selection tool, and I'm not going to draw any more circles, and just click off this. So what we have here is the basic geometry made out of two rectangles and a circle. Now, in order to create this single piece of geometry, I want to add the circle and this smaller rectangle together to create that arch. I don't want them to be two objects. And the way to do that is a tool called Add Surface. And what I need to do is select the surfaces that I want to add together, which is a small rectangle here, clicking once. And in order to multiple select, I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select the circle. So I now have the rectangle and the circle. It's important. You can't add one surface together. You need to make sure you click two or more surfaces, otherwise ain't got nothing to add. Once I've done that, if I go up to my modify menu, very easy for me to say. And there's a tool at the bottom here called Add Surface. If I click on this, we now have the circle and the small rectangle joined together. Yippee! Again, looking back, that is what we have in here, which is excellent. So now what I'm going to do before I go any further is I'm going to save this document. It's important that you save and save at crucial moments. Vectorworks can crash, it can have errors, it can fall down like any other software. You will also find that you might accidentally do something that you can't undo, and you will need to go back to a previous save. So saving regularly is a good idea. At the moment, you can see at the top here, it just says Untitled 1. That's because I've not done a save as. If it were an already made file, it would say the name of the file. In order to save, I'm going to File. I'm going to go to Save As. And I'm just going to choose, yep, sure, why not? I'm going to call it flat size. You can call it whatever you want. long as it makes sense to you. And I'm going to hit save now. And you should see this says PAD, Arch Flat Exercise now on this tab. And we are saved. Make sure you do that regularly. What we're going to do now is we are going to create some larger, we're going to create the thickness of this surround here for the arch window to be able to create that return. So we are going to do that next.